What if everything you thought you knew about ancient China was a beautiful lie? From explosive accidents to walls that weren't really walls, history's about to get messy. Here are 5 myths about ancient China you probably still believe. Number 1. The Chinese invented gunpowder for warfare. Imagine you're an ancient Chinese alchemist in the 9th century. You've been up all night, grinding herbs, mixing minerals, desperately trying to cook up immortality. You're not looking to start a war. You're just trying to live forever, vibes only. But instead of the fountain of youth, boom, you accidentally invent the world's first explosive. Welcome to the weird and literally groundbreaking birth of gunpowder. So here's the thing. The Chinese did invent gunpowder. Yes, 100%. But the idea that they whipped it up for warfare? Myth busted. At least at first. It all started during the Tang Dynasty, with scholars who were less Call of Duty and more Harry Potter meets DIY chemistry. They were obsessed with the idea of immortality, how to cheat death, live forever, vibe in the afterlife, you name it. What did they end up making instead? A spicy little mix of charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter, aka the original recipe for, oh no, the house is on fire. And what did they do with this not-so-immortality juice? Throw it into the sky. Literally, the earliest use of gunpowder was not for combat. It was for fireworks, festival fun, and scaring away evil spirits. Imagine, ancient village square, night sky lit up, elders saying, "Ah yes, the spirits hate loud noises and bright colors. Let's light 200 of these and hope no one loses an eyebrow." There were also medicinal uses. Yes, people tried to ingest gunpowder. You can probably imagine the results. Not ideal. It wasn't until much later, dynasties down the line, that someone finally went, hey, what if we weaponize this stuff? Cue the birth of bombs, flamethrowers, and rockets that would forever change the world of warfare. But remember, gunpowder didn't start with war. It started with fireworks, weird medicine, and a giant cosmic oops. Number 2, the Great Wall of China was built all at once. When people imagine the Great Wall of China, they usually picture this grand, unbroken ribbon of stone winding across mountains, deserts, and the occasional goat path, built in one epic burst of ancient genius. One emperor, one plan, one big wall. Boom. Done. But not quite. The truth is, the Great Wall wasn't a single project, but a centuries-long patchwork effort. Different dynasties, including the Qin, Han, and Ming, each built, rebuilt, or added onto the wall for their own reasons, often hundreds of years apart. It's less like a master plan and more like an ancient group project with zero coordination and a lot of budget cuts. And it wasn't just one wall either. It was a sprawling network of walls, trenches, forts, and watchtowers, some of them connected, many not. Some parts were made of stone, sure, but others were just tamped earth or even wood. In certain regions, the only thing stopping an invasion might have been a really intimidating pile of dirt and a guy with a flag. Think of it as the IKEA of fortifications, built piece by piece, sometimes reused, often confusing, and always requiring more labor than anyone planned for, instructions not included. So, no, the Great Wall didn't just pop up one day as a massive border defense system. It evolved, adapted, and grew chaotic over time, just like the history it was meant to protect. As for whether all that effort was actually worth it, well, that's a bit of a debate. The Great Wall wasn't an impenetrable force field. Invaders still found ways through, around, or simply bribed their way past guards. Its real strength was more psychological and strategic than purely physical. The wall acted like a massive warning system, with watchtowers sending smoke or fire signals to alert armies of approaching threats. It also slowed down invasions, giving defenders time to mobilize. Plus, it was a clear message. This is Chinese territory, and we're serious about protecting it. So while the Great Wall didn't single-handedly stop every enemy, it was definitely a crucial part of a bigger defense strategy. Kind of like a giant keep out sign that also doubled as a very long hiking trail. Number 3, ancient China was completely isolated from the world. There's this persistent idea that ancient China was like a hermit kingdom, walled off, mysterious, and completely cut off from the rest of the world until Marco Polo strolled in with a journal and some travel snacks. But reality? Way more connected, and honestly, way more global than people give it credit for. Yes, China had its borders and its dynastic pride, but it was never totally closed off. In fact, the Silk Road, a network of trade routes stretching from China all the way to the Mediterranean, was buzzing with activity as early as the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE 220 CE. Chinese merchants were exporting silk, porcelain, tea, and paper long before Europe had even figured out forks. And it wasn't a one-way street. In return, they got glassware, spices, horses, musical instruments, and new ideas. It was less, we don't talk to outsiders, and more, if you've got something interesting, let's make a deal. Even the Tang Dynasty, often considered a golden age of Chinese civilization, was a hotbed of international exchange. The capital city, Chang'an, was one of the most cosmopolitan places on Earth, filled with foreign diplomats, Persian traders, Buddhist monks from India, and even Central Asian musicians jamming in the markets. It was like the ancient version of Times Square, but with more poetry and fewer LED billboards. Now, were there moments of intentional isolation? Absolutely. Certain dynasties pulled back, tightened borders, and focused inward, especially when dealing with internal unrest or foreign threats. But to say ancient China was always isolated is like saying your neighbor's a recluse because they didn't come to one barbecue. The truth is, China was trading, exchanging, and influencing far more than the myth suggests. So no, ancient China wasn't a sealed vault of secrets. It was part of a massive, ancient conversation, just in a language most history books forgot to translate. Number 4. Ancient China invented paper to write books. When we think about the invention of paper, we imagine ancient scholars immediately diving into deep philosophy, epic poetry, or maybe the first ever to-do list. But truth is, when the Chinese first invented paper during the Han Dynasty, around 105 CE, literature wasn't exactly the top priority. Early paper was a bit more practical. It was used to wrap goods, pad delicate objects, and yes, handle certain hygienic needs we don't usually associate with the written word. Before it became the noble vessel for Confucian thought and timeless poetry, paper was more like the ancient version of bubble wrap and tissue paper. It was light, cheap, easy to produce, and incredibly useful. So of course people started using it for everything from packaging to fashion. Writing on it? That came a little later, once folks realized, hey, this is way easier than carving on bamboo or silk. By the time paper took its place in the literary world, it transformed everything: education, administration, and eventually, printing. But that transformation didn't happen overnight. The paper might have started off just wrapping things before it got all serious about documenting things. So next time you hold a book, remember, its great-great-grandpaper was probably used to wrap fish or, well, something less elegant. Number 5, China was always under a single unified empire. When we think of ancient China, it's easy to picture a vast empire ruled by a single emperor from a glittering palace, calling all the shots like a historical CEO. But the truth is, for much of its early history, China wasn't one big, unified state. It was a patchwork of rival kingdoms, warlords, and shifting alliances, often more interested in fighting each other than in uniting under one banner. Before the first real unification under the Qin dynasty in 221 BCE, China went through centuries of division and chaos, most notably during the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period. During these times, powerful regional states competed for dominance, each with their own rulers, armies, and ambitions. It wasn't some minor political disagreement either. It was full-on Game of Thrones, with philosophy, diplomacy, and a whole lot of sword swinging. Even after unification, things didn't stay unified for long. Dynasties rose and fell, rebellions flared up, and regional warlords constantly challenged imperial control. There were long stretches, like during the Three Kingdoms period, 220-280 CE, or the Five Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, when China was once again fractured into competing states. The idea of one China may have been the goal, but reality was often messier. Honestly, if you're getting manga vibes from all this, like never-ending arcs with new villains, surprise alliances, and dramatic power-ups, you're not far off. Ancient Chinese history could easily fill a 1,000-episode saga and still end on a cliffhanger. And that wraps up our dive into 5 myths about ancient China you probably believed. If you enjoyed unraveling history with a twist, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us which myth surprised you the most, or which civilization we should tackle next.